Welcome to Spotlight with Sweta, the space where wisdom meets the world. Today we are honored to host a spiritual visionary whose journey transcends borders and traditions. From being initiated by the legendary Swami Muktananda Ji to serving as the national coordinator and spiritual director for the SYDA Foundation. From leading retreats in the sacred hills of Assisi to taking meditation into more than 200 churches across the United States, and now championing a groundbreaking education reform that is bringing meditation to the heart of India's universities. He is a bridge between East and West, silence and serving. Joining us today is David Nowe, also known as Swami Brahmananda. Get ready to enter a space where silence speaks and stillness becomes your guide. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for the beautiful introduction, Sweta.
It's so nice to have you here. So, your attraction towards India, you are a sadhu, you are a Swami. How did this journey happen? From where did it start? When was the inner calling?
The inner calling began back in 1968 when I was at the university, at Columbia University. I began to question my values, and my roommate studied transcendental meditation and introduced it to me.
He was an Indian?
He was a Westerner. This was in school at Columbia University in New York City. And he started talking about this thing called meditation. No idea what it was. He said, let me give you an example. Come to my room and we'll just sit. And he said, have no thoughts. And believe me, I couldn't have no thoughts. My mind was racing, but I was intrigued.
You must be very young then.
I was 18. I was a freshman and studying philosophy. I particularly liked Plato. Socrates, his guru, said, know thyself. An unexamined life is not worth living. And that's what I was doing at that time, was reevaluating my perspective, my belief system. I was raised Catholic, very serious Catholic. I was almost a Franciscan. I went 12 years to Catholic school, 4 years Franciscan school, lived in a very conservative background, considered going into the Marines. This was during the Vietnam War, so I came from a very conservative, traditional background to Columbia University in the radical 60s and began to question all of my values. So I began a quest. For the next 7 years, I traveled the world. Through my Columbia University studies, I was able to study in France and in Lebanon, where I met a Sufi master, studied for a while in Japan, where I learned Zen Buddhism. So I was seeking. And then in 1975, my yoga teacher told me that there was a great guru coming to the West. I'd never been to India, never really understood the scriptures. I read the Bhagavad Gita, but it didn't make any sense to me. But she said that Muktananda is going to be in the United States, and you have a chance to meet him. So he found me.
Okay. You didn't look for him, he found you.
He found me. Well, I was actually taking a course with the Rosicrucians, which is a mystical Christian order. I was taking a correspondence course 2 years, and the very last lesson was one line. It said, when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. And it was that week that I got a call from my yoga teacher that Muktananda was coming to the United States, and I would have the chance to meet him.
And that transformed your journey from there, transformed your life?
From the very first moment I met Muktananda, and actually began with a journey cross country. I was living in New York City, and there was a group of 9 cars that was traveling to the West Coast to meet Muktananda, and I had heard that he had this ability, this capacity to awaken the Kundalini. I've heard about it, I'd read about it, but I hadn't experienced it all. So I was really eager to meet him. And I remember the morning of our private darshan. I was given a private darshan to come meet him, and I really prepared for it. Because having studied around the world with all these different teachers, I knew that Sometimes they would test you with a test question, like the Zen master might say, what's the sound of one hand clapping, something like that. So I had a couple of cups of coffee to make sure that my mind was really alert for that test question. And then I also purified my mind. I had, by this time, I'd actually studied transcendental meditation with the Maharishi and was practicing. So I meditated extra long that morning to purify my mind. So with all these expectations, I went to meet Muktananda. I was presented.
Your heart longed for him.
I was ready. I was looking for something more. I'd done yoga, meditation, philosophy, all those sorts of things, but I was dry inside.
What was it like meeting him then?
Well, I was brought before him, and again with all these expectations of what it would be like. He said to me, "What's your name?" And I couldn't remember. My mind went absolutely blank. The energy in his field was so powerful that my mind was blank. And he laughed, and he had these peacock feathers. And he swatted me with the peacock feathers, and I started to get woozy. And then he said, "Well, where are you from?" I had no idea where I was from, but I remembered my name. I said, "Baba, I'm David Nowe." He said, "Very good." And hit me with the feathers again. And he said, "Well, what kind of work do you do?" In his field, the energy was so powerful that I just couldn't remember. But I remembered where I was from. So I said, "Baba, I'm from New York." And he chuckled a little bit and swatted me with the feathers again and told me to go sit in the corner. He was meeting other people. And as I sat in the corner, I felt this contentment, this peace began to well up within me. And he just casually glanced over at me, and there was a bolt of light that went from his eye into my heart. And it's hard to describe what happened, but my heart opened, and I was madly in love with him, with everyone around me. The light was filled with room, and I went into samadhi. They let me sit there for almost 3 hours, and I had no idea of what time had passed, but I had found what I was looking for.
You are a direct disciple of Muktananda Ji, and how is it to be initiated? Kundalini Jagrat, how does it happen? Does a student need to be ready? How does a guru decide?
It's really the disciple, the readiness of the disciple. Are they open and receptive? Are they yearning for it? In the tradition of Kashmiri Shaivism, which is the philosophy that I teach from, they talk about 27 levels of Shaktipat. So traditionally in the ancient days, when the student had completed a long sadhana, they'd received Shaktipat from the guru, full enlightened, because they'd done the work. When Muktananda came to the West, there were very few of us who had done the work. So his role was really to initiate us at the beginning, to give us a little taste of what the Atman is like. What's it like to have a direct experience of your own inner self, to give us a taste of what it would be like to become self-realized. And it was that little taste that motivated, at least myself and many others, to pursue sadhana. So I had an instant experience of the highest reality, and then I needed to do the work, and I've been working on it for over 50 years.
So 27 levels Shaktipat has?
Different, yes, so different levels of intensity. So in my own case, it was pretty intense awakening. When I met Muktananda, I had rheumatoid arthritis.
Oh.
I actually met him, I was on crutches, and I had been taking cortisone injections for the pain and butazolidine, different medications, and it was crippling rheumatoid arthritis at the age of 25. Oh. And the prognosis was that it would only get worse. So what happened with me, and it's different for everyone, what happened with me is, as soon as I would sit for meditation, the Kundalini would begin to perform what we call Kriyas. Kriyas are movements of the awakened Shakti that move through the physical body, through the subtle body, and remove whatever obstacles there are. So in my case, there were a lot of physical obstacles. You know, I had my fingers and my feet. So I began to have physical kriyas. So every time I would sit for meditation, there would be a fire that was lit, and it would begin with pranayama, bastrika. And this would go on for 45 minutes without stopping. Then my body would begin to perform hatha yoga asanas. I would do rotations and spinning and different asanas. Over a period of 9 months, these kriyas were really, really intense. At the end of 9 months, the arthritis was completely gone, and it's never come back. So it's different for everybody. Sometimes it's physical kriyas, sometimes it's emotional. Sometimes when people get awakened, they have peaks of ecstasy and moments of depression. So if there's any emotional blocks, any mental blocks, whatever limitation, any of the blocks in any of the chakras, the energy moves in there and gets the energy going so it can remove the blocks. So it's different for everybody. I have friends who had wild physical kriyas like I have, and others, one of my very dear friends, Brenda Brish, who co-teaches with me on the Second Education Project, she says that, you know, she'd been meditating for 25 years and she'd never had one of these experiences, but her life was completely transformed. So people who need to have the blocks removed and need to have experiences, get them, but others are transformed within. You see, this Kundalini energy, it's an omniscient energy. It's the supreme shakti.
Guru helps to do this, initiate this?
Yeah, so Shaktipat literally means the descent of the divine energy.
Yes.
So a guru is the fully awakened energy, and he actually, through his physical touch, or through his thought, or through his word, or simply through his intention, injects a bit of that sacred energy and awakens that dormant potential that exists within all of us. Think about priming a pump. If you're working with the pump and there's no water coming, you put a little water in there, and then it comes back. So Shaktipat is very much like priming a pump, where the guru will touch you, transmit a bit of his own awakened energy, and take on some of the karma, literally take on some of the karma that's blocking the awakening of that dormant power. And I use the word dormant. It's not exactly dormant, because the Kundalini is the energy that breathes us.
Not all of us realize this.
There's a divine power within us that 24/7 we breathe. We can consciously breathe, but when we're sleeping and we're working, we breathe automatically. That's the Kundalini.
Yeah.
It digests our food, it circulates the blood, it knows where to send the nutrients. So it's omniscient energy that's within us, but it's said to be dormant because it's only working at a fraction of its potential. It's only working on the physical and the subtle level.
Absolutely.
It's not working at the level of the
Supreme
absolute.
level, yeah.
And it has the capacity to do that, to work at the highest level. And that's what the Guru awakens, the capacity to unfold our full potential. All of us feel that. Don't we all feel like I could be better? I could improve myself. We take self-improvement courses, and we read books, and we do things to improve ourselves because we intuitively know that we have this power within us that's somehow not expressing itself fully and completely. And that's what the Guru helps you to do it.
And what is Kashmiri Shaivism?
It's a tradition, ancient tradition. What we call Kashmiri Shaivism is really a 20th century term for an ancient lineage. The tradition I study from originated around the 7th century with a great sage by the name of Vasaguptacharya, where he had a dream where he was directed by Lord Shiva to go to a particular mountain, and there was a particular rock there called Shankarpali rock. He touched the rock, and it turned over, and inscribed on the bottom of the rock were the 77 sutras of Kashmiri Shaivism. It's a monistic philosophy, so it's like it's a radically non-dual tradition. So non-dual tradition we think of Shankaracharya. Brahman alone is real. the world's an illusion, and the individual soul is none other than Brahman. So it posits that there's a second. It says it's not real. Shaivism says all of it is consciousness. The very first sutra says, Chaitanyam Atma, that the nature of reality is consciousness itself. The nature of the individual soul is pure consciousness. The nature of everyone that's in existence is pure consciousness. And the nature of physical reality, underlying it all, is consciousness. When scientists would come to meet Baba, physicists would come, and there were quite a number of them, he would tell them to read a particular scripture called the Spanda Karika, which talks about the nature of this from a scientific point of view. So I happen to love that tradition. I took sannyas, so I formally renounced at the age of 30, and later became more intimately involved in Kashmiri Shaivism, where there's nothing to renounce. You know, when I went to Kashmir, I stayed at the ashram of Lakshmanju, Ishwara Ashram Trust. They said, while you're here, don't wear your orange. I said, why? In Shaivism, there's nothing to renounce. If everything is God, what can you renounce? Yes. There's a sutra that says, Nashivam Vijite Kvachit. There's nothing that exists that's not Shiva. If it exists, it's of the nature of consciousness. The fundamental reality is the light of being itself. So without that, it doesn't exist. So it's radically non-dual.
I would love it if you recite Shiva Stotram for us.
The Shiva Stotram?
A few verses, few lines.
Well, I'm not sure I know the Shiva Stotram. I know some of the Shiva Sutras.
Okay,
Shiva Sutras.
So I would love if you recite Shiva Sutras.
Well, let me just give you the first maybe 5 of them, because they really encapsulate what's unique about Shaivism. Because, as you know, in the Indian philosophy, they build on each other. You know, Vedanta built on Sankhya, and I like to think of Shaivism as the next evolute in the philosophy of the Sanatana Dharma. So beyond Vedanta is Kashmiri Shaivism. So the very first sutra says, Chaitanyam Atma. And this says it all, that everything is consciousness. There's nothing that exists that's not consciousness. And so we meditate on our own self with the awareness that God dwells within us as our own being, by whatever name we call it. Whether you're Christian, you could say Jesus. We talk about the Christ within, or the Atman within, Allah within. So it's that nature of reality. So if that's true, why do people suffer? Why are we not happy? Right? Shiva Sutras say, Yanam Bandha, that supreme consciousness decided to become the universe and to sport as the universe. In order to do that, Shiva, Shakti, in this tradition, they're inseparable. You can't have one without the other. So Shiva is being, and Shakti is the awareness of that being. So Shiva Shakti decided to create the universe and to sport as the universe. In order to do that and to experience particular things in the universe, they had to forget who they were. So Jnana Bandha means limited knowledge is bondage. So Shiva Shakti is the totality of knowledge itself. And through Maya Shakti, which is a Shakti of Shiva, she willingly contracts and takes the form of particulars. So instead of being omniscient, we now have knowledge of particular things. For example, the eyes can only see particular. We can't see the totality of everything. So we limit ourselves in terms of our knowledge, limit ourselves in terms of our capacity to do things. Instead of being swatantriya, unimpeded sovereignty, where we have the capacity to manifest anything and everything, we now have particular desires. And we can satisfy some of those desires, but some of those other desires go unfulfilled, right? We don't get everything we want. We practice manifesting so we can get what we want. This is a limitation of the Ichcha Shakti, the unimpeded sovereignty of universal consciousness. Now we can do just particular things. Instead of being eternal, we now believe that we're limited in time and space. All human beings, we believe that I'm going to be on this earth for
a certain
70,
period
80 years, a certain period of time, in a certain place, in a particular body. And we believe that that's true. Yeah. When in reality, Shaivism says that beyond the physical body, beyond the mind, beyond the subtle body, beyond even the causal body, there's a spark of the divine within each of us that is eternal. That's not limited by time and space, not limited by desires. It's actually
limitless.
It's limitless. It's beyond time, beyond space. It has the potential to know everything and to do anything that it chooses. But we've forgotten we have that capacity. So when you get Shaktipat from a guru, you remember. And one of the ways that Shaivism described is pratyabhijna, it's recognition. So many of the practices of Shaivism help us to recognize this divine potential. It can happen like that. It usually doesn't, the recognition happens like that, but it takes some sadhana, some meditation and practice to be ready.
You just said that we have forgotten that, this thing happens, most of us. So that's how you took the knowledge and introduced the churches, or how did you bridge the gap?
Well, after my guru took Mahasamadhi, I came back to the West. Actually, I was leading an ashram in Los Angeles, but I left the ashram and decided to pursue a life in the world, and I discovered a particular church in Southern California, the Unity Church of Tustin, and I didn't know it at the time, but the minister of the church had received Shaktipat in the Siddha lineage and was praying that a monk would come to the church and continue teaching her. So when I arrived, she came up to me. I went to the Sunday service, and after service she came up and she said, "You're here to teach." I said, "Oh no, I'm not." I took 2 steps back, but we had an instant sort of recognition of each other, and we started this God realization ministry where we looked at the teachings of the Unity Church and the New Thought movement. So the Unity Church, Science of Mind, Christian Science, a lot of the churches were based on Indian thought.
Yes, I wanted to understand this link, Christianity, faith, and the Indian knowledge. How did it link? Yeah.
When Swami Vivekananda came to the United States, and I think it was, forgive me if the dates wrong, I think it was 1893 that he spoke at the Parliament of Religions. Many of the spiritual leaders were there, and Charles Fillmore was there and heard Vivekananda speak and was totally inspired to create a new church using Christian language, because we're in a Christian country. Most people in America are Christians. It's not a Christian country, but there are many Christians there. So he thought, wouldn't it be interesting to create a church integrating the teachings of Jesus and the teachings of India. And so he created the Unity Church, and there are thousands of them now. Marge Britt and I began to co-teach together. She was a Unity minister, so she knew all the scriptures of the Unity Church. And we began to look at the writings of Charles Fillmore and found that there were direct quotes from the Bhagavad Gita and from the Vedanta and from Vivekananda, unattributed quotes, because in those days he would simply speak and people stenographers would take down what he said. So we saw that there was this commonality. And once we discovered that, I began to be invited to other churches in the United States. And over about a 5-year period, I went to over 200 New Thought churches in the United States and showed the commonalities of the Eastern teachings with the Christian teachings. For example,
It's been accepted very well?
I wouldn't say that it's universally accepted. You know, some of the more fundamentalist conservative churches would never believe that. But in the 200 churches based on New Thought teachings, they were very excited about it. And I used to do a workshop on Sunday afternoons in the church called The Great Awakening, where I would give Shaktipat, you know, in the church to the people that were there. And I would talk to them about how Jesus Christ was a Shaktipat guru.
Oh.
Yeah, when you think about, and I would tell the story about Pentecost Sunday. So this is 40 days after Jesus has been crucified. And the 12 disciples are in the upper room, huddled, frightened that they're going to be found out that they were a disciple of Jesus and they would be crucified. And they were scared to death, right? That people would find out. When suddenly there was a great wind, and there were tongues of fire that descended from the heavens and lit on the foreheads of each of the 12 disciples.
Okay.
And they became filled with passion. They became completely fearless. It said that they began to speak in tongues, meaning that they could speak to the people in many different languages, and people would understand what they were saying. They began to touch people, physically touch people and heal people. Miracles began to happen. So this was their initiation as a group. That Jesus appeared, gave them this transmission. And you know, there are many in India who believe devoutly that Jesus lived a good portion of time in India, you know, and I love to tell this story if I may.
Yes, please.
But you know, in the Christian tradition, at the birth of Jesus, there's a story about 3 wise men coming from the east and bringing gifts to baby Jesus. But they don't really elaborate on it. When I was in Srinagar...
We have seen this picture. Yeah, these photos are quite common.
Yes. So when I was in Srinagar, I went to a temple there called Rospal, which is where Jesus is thought to be buried. So I began to look into the story of Jesus, and particularly the missing years of Jesus. So what they believe in Kashmir, this particular temple has a plaque with the story of Jesus. His name is Isa.
Okay.
Isa, they called him Isa, and he was born of a virgin, and there were 3 wise men who came from Kashmir. Interestingly enough, so they think that it was the king of Kashmir, a Vedic astrologer who knew the meaning of the star and where to go to find it, by the position. And the 3rd person was the future guru of Jesus. So he blessed Jesus as a baby.
And would predict.
And predicted that he would come. And then at the age of 12, interestingly enough, in the Christian Bible, there's no mention of Jesus between the ages of 12 and 30. It's often referred to as the missing years. And according to this tradition in Kashmir, Jesus came to Kashmir and did sadhana with his guru that had given him the blessing at birth, and attained full enlightenment, and traveled around India giving Shaktipat and blessing people. And then he returned to Israel, to Palestine, at the age of 30, where he did his public work, was crucified, but they say he didn't die. That they gave him, in the New Testament, they say, they gave him some vinegar. At the last moment of Jesus' life, he says, I thirst. Gave him something to drink that they believe made him look like he had died. So they put him in a tomb. He rose from the dead, lived to the age of 80, another 50 years in Kashmir, and then left his body there in Srinagar. So that's the story. You know, they also believe that Moses is buried in Kashmir, right near the Shiva rock. I have no idea. There are some people doing some research on this, but you know, in the Old Testament, Moses looked for the Holy Land for years and years and traveled all around, but never was able to enter into it. Many believe that the Holy Land was Kashmir, and that's where he left his body. There's a cave there that people venerate as the place where Moses is buried.
Tell me something, Swamiji. In today's generation, we call them Gen Z. And do you think the newer generation is drifting away from the real purpose of life?
It's hard to say. It's hard to say. I see people are more interested in their phones. They get up in the morning, they have to check their phone before they go to sleep at night. They have their phone. I'm a little concerned with that because what I have noticed. This is just an observation, so this isn't a fact. It's just something I believe to be true. Is that younger people today seem to have more of a problem keeping focus on a long time than we did growing up. Because we didn't have phones, scrolling, short attention span, moving, and when you're doom scrolling like that, you're getting a little dopamine hit. So people become addicted to it. When I was leading retreats in Assisi, Italy, there was an awareness in corporations that people were becoming addicted to social media, and so people would come to my retreats in order to break that. And when they would come, they would check in, they would leave their cell phones, their computers there, and at the end of the retreat they could have them back. So it much of like Facebook and things like that, much of that is developed with the idea of getting you addicted so you can keep coming back and they can make more money by more eyeballs that look at it. So I also believe in the dialectic, that there's a swing, and I think at some point it'll swing back. This second education project that I'm working on, I'm hoping, and we just, by the way, completed
I wanted to come to the second education project. What is it?
Yeah, so second education is an initiative that began about 6 years ago. So first education is traditional education. It's biology. It's the study of
all subjects.
Subjects. It's the subject. Think of it. The subject is the outer world. Second education is the study of the
inner world.
Inner world. So it's not. We're not teaching anything new. But traditionally, you would have to go to an ashram or a gurukul or go away from the world to get this kind of knowledge. With the internet and everything, everything's available. We're just bringing it into the school systems. So we've started, we have so far 10 universities that have signed up for this. We've
Where are they?
Well, the primary one that we just completed our first full year with is Doon University in Dehradun. We did 2 semesters. We had, I think, 57 students just
They
complete.
are accepting it?
Very much so. Very much so. The reviews were extraordinary because it's practical. It's not about information. The requirement for the course was that you meditate every day and you keep a journal of your experience. And it doesn't have to have stars and bells and whistles and wild experience. You just have to do it every day. So you can sit and say, I was woodsy and I couldn't get comfortable and I don't feel like... That's okay, as long as you sit for the time to do it. So last week, in fact, we had our practicum. So I interviewed all 57 students, and to a person, they were grateful. What I've discovered, there's a lot of I knew that there was anxiety, but I also discovered there's a lot of anger in this generation. I don't quite know what the source of that is, but one of the feedbacks we got is that it was very, very helpful in controlling their anger. People would say things to them and normally they would erupt, but after taking the course, the anger wasn't there. The anxiety and the nervousness of taking tests. We had our final exam for second education the same week they had their final exams. They said before their other final exams they would meditate and their minds would be clear, they could be relaxed. So they were very grateful that we offered that. And the vision is that this curriculum will be brought into the school systems of India. We're starting at the universities, and my vision, big vision of it is that this will become a major, recognized by the Indian government, that you can major in second education, do your full...
This needs to be incorporated in the curriculum.
Into the curriculum.
Traditional curriculum.
Into the traditional curriculum, so we've done the test at Doon University. We found that the curriculum works. Now we're introducing it into others, and we're developing online, because I can't go to all the universities in India. I'd love to, but it's available online. We'd like to develop a core of teachers that could then bring it into the lower levels of school. And it's just such a joy. I learned meditation from India. And I'm humbled by the fact that
you were able to give it back.
Able to give it back in a Western form. What I'm also finding is that many young people, and I've been told this by the local swamis, they often invite me to come teach. They say they want to hear it from a Westerner. Many of the young people will, believe if it's coming from a Westerner and there's science. That's one of the things that I'd like to do when I teach, is I'd like to bring in as much modern scientific theory as I can to validate. This isn't airy-fairy religious stuff. In fact, I like to keep religion out of it. I don't want it to be Hindu or Buddhist or Christian or any of that. It's about the self.
Yeah.
So second education is the science of the inner self. And that's universal. Mm-hmm. So we have Muslims and Buddhists and Christians, Hindus in the class, and I welcome that.
Children from all religions.
Absolutely.
So in the end, I would like to close it with Gita verses. If you can just would like to speak a few.
Well, let's see. I have many that I use that are just many that are favorites. I love to talk about the self. The self cannot be cut. The self cannot be burnt. Cannot be wetted, because it's eternal. I also like to talk about the Gita.
Okay, so we say it in Nayanam Chidyanti Shastrani Nayanam Dahati Pavaka. आत्मा ना तो आग जला सकती है, ना तो उसको हवा नष्ट कर सकती है. I think this is the same you said.
Yes. So much of my Sanskrit verses, because I've been teaching in the West for so long, have slipped from my memory, but the teachings haven't.
So nice talking to you, Swamiji. Would love to connect again with you for another podcast. Thank you so much for being in the show.
I would be more than happy to join you. Thank you.
Namaste.
Namaste.